which point should I address? We'll start with my presentation, and then I might skip some slides, and then I might a few things in between. So let me see if I can.
Stane, just one sec. I'll mute everyone, and then I unmute you, so you can go ahead. Just one sec. Okay. Okay, you're on.
Okay, good. So let me try to figure out how I share this slide. Share this. I assume you can see my slide. Okay, you can. Okay, let's just quickly go through the beginning of this presentation. When we talk about polymer, we basically mean a very long molecule. That's all that is polymer. In this case, we mean a long molecule of plastics because polymer plastic is used exclusively for all banknotes that are in circulation on polymer. We'll skip this a bit technical part. Maybe we stop at this one. So modern polymer notes, which were issued first in 1988, were produced on Guardian substrate, which is basically, as you can see here, a two-layer substrate with a thickness of about 75 microns, and then of course additional layers of ink, security features would be, and varnishing, the final protection layer would be added on top of this, adding a few microns. So for example, intaglio print could be anywhere between, say, 20 and 60, maybe even more microns on one side of the note. Why the substrate here is two-layered, we'll see a little bit later. So how a polymer note's made? Basically, at a clear film manufacturer, which produces this clear film. For Guardian, this is how it's produced. You can see a large balloon, which is about 2 to 3 stories high. And this balloon comes down, is joined at the bottom, and that's why 2 layers are produced. And this is specifically for Guardian. The other commercially successful substrate, Safeguard, is a 1-layer substrate, and because it's produced differently. And this clear film would then go to the banknote substrate manufacturer, who will apply already different security features to the clear film. So let me go. Sorry. Can you tell me what you are seeing now? Are you seeing myself or the PowerPoint?
PowerPoint.
Okay, let me try to get out of the PowerPoint. Sorry, I haven't used this WebEx before. I used some other. Fabrizio, can you help me? How do I get out of the PowerPoint?
You want to share something else than PowerPoint?
Yeah, I want to share. I want you to look at myself because I'm going to show some samples.
Through your camera, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So let me try to figure this out. Sorry. Okay, you can now see me. Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see you. I can see you in a small window. I guess everyone else can see you in a small window.
Yeah, okay. And if you enlarge that window, you can see a larger picture of me. Okay. So when this transparent substrate comes to the substrate manufacturer, they will first add a white layer, which will enable the print to stick on the substrate, as well as security features to be applied. Of course, this white layer will not be applied on the entire surface of the node, where you have the clear window. It will be left transparent intentionally. So let's say this is a substrate, safeguard substrate from De La Rue, and you can see already very high complexity of this substrate, already containing certain security features, beginning with a clear window. You can see optically variable links in this area and here as well. Another example of the substrate is this. So what the substrate manufacturer will try to do is make this as complex as possible, in order to sort of just to deter counterfeiting. And this substrate will be delivered then to the printer to print on additional print layers and additional security features. Let me show you some examples. So this is another substrate by Note Printing Australia, and you can see how first they start with a very complex substrate. Of course, they have a lot of windows because this was a test note just to show what they can do, and this is then the final product. So basically, once the substrate manufacturer produces this, this is already a high security substrate, which is tightly controlled by the printer, by the central bank. So basically, you cannot get hold of this commercially. This is another example from Australia of the substrate and the note from both sides. Okay. So once this is delivered to the printer, there will be additional security features applied, and they will basically start, normally they will start with offset printing. Offset printing is usually applied nowadays on both sides of the node simultaneously. That's why we call it simultaneous offset, which means there is a perfect registration between the front of the node and the back of the node. They are both printed at the same time, and that's how you get the see-through features on polymer and on paper nodes, where the design from the front and the back will match exactly. And of course, if you do not print some simultaneously with perfect registration on both sides, you will get a mismatch, and this is a pretty effective security feature to deter all counterfeits that that do not have the two-side printing capability. So it's not that easy to register front and back. Okay, the next printing which will usually be applied is intaglio printing, raised printing, and of course the central bank can choose whether it wants to have this applied just on front, on back, on both sides, or not at all. This will depend on the security level they want to add to the node, the durability aspect, how much money they can afford, how high the denomination is. So basically, the more intaglio you have on the node, the more secure the node is, because it's very difficult to replicate intaglio printing on a node. Of course, for low denomination nodes, it doesn't matter that much because they are less frequently counterfeited. And of course, the circulation velocity is also very high, which means it's it deteriorates pretty quickly, and in such circumstances, intaglio is not as effective. And of course, there will be additional print processes used, from silk screen printing, which typically applies certain optically variable ink that will change color, that will make the note a little bit shiny. So just an additional layer that would need to be replicated in case somebody would want to counterfeit the notes. And of course, there is a foil application as well. This foil, which is being increasingly used in banknotes nowadays, can be applied by the printer or even by the substrate manufacturer in the previous phase. There is also a letterpress process or numbering to apply serial numbers. And nowadays, almost all banknotes are varnished with a special lacquer formulation to prolong the life of the banknote, to keep it in circulation for longer. Okay, let me go. Okay, so in terms of security features, nowadays we are seeing increased use of let's say 3D security features, color changing security features, holograms, and so on. Basically, everything that is not in a way static, but produces some sort of dynamic effect. And of course, this can be achieved in a variety of ways. Let me, for example, this is one of the latest, you're probably all familiar with this. This is one of the latest banknotes on polymer that was issued recently. You can see there's a color change. I'm not sure whether you can see this on camera or not, but this is basically what we want to achieve. And also, this hologram is highly detailed, and it doesn't have a uniform shape. Unlike, for example, this Canadian one, which was an earlier one, you can see that the edges of this one are very straight, whereas this is much more sort of organic and thus much more difficult to replicate. So this is what we are going to see, and probably the hologram and the surrounding design could also merge into a more complex design. So let's go a little bit more to 3D features. So we have here, this banknote was a collaboration of several industry suppliers. For example, Note Printing Australia actually printed this note, and there was a collaboration with Kurz, SICPA, Lenses, KBA, Notasis. So these all different suppliers came together in order to produce this banknote. So everybody is adding something to the complexity of the note. Okay, I have another example here. So again, this is a sort of achieving a 3D effect, and I'll show you the latest note on Guardian Substrate by was printed by PW, the Polish state printer, and this is the cinema feature. So you can see how this changes, and if you actually see it live, you would be able to see sort of in-depth feature. It almost makes you dizzy when you look at it. Okay, and this is the feature that will start appearing in circulation notes within a year, probably within months. This is, of course, as I said, on Guardian Substrate, but we will see similar feature coming out on Safeguard substrate produced by De La Rue as well. Another thing I want to show is, for example, when we look at this Australian notes, this series started appearing in 1992. And it lasted basically until 1917, I think 1918. You can still find these notes in circulation. So it's basically almost 30 notes, 30 years of circulation of this banknote series without changing security features. And 30 years is actually a very long time for counterfeiters to catch up with the producer and start replicating security features. Of course, we've seen some counterfeits of these notes, but nothing major. I mean, the counterfeits on these notes were lower than on paper notes that were regularly updated with modern security features. But this 30-year-old formulation actually held up pretty well. Of course, it cannot go on indefinitely. That's why the Australians produce a much updated note. And this is actually a good indication of how notes are changing. You can see that the security the clear window, which is very effective on this top note, the modern note, has been enlarged a lot. It has been made not in a sort of a simple shape, which is clearly delineated from the image. It was made deliberately very complex, with the design going through into the main design, with lots of overlapping features. This hologram, of course, is intentionally has very fine, very small lines, which, if you wanted to replicate this, it would be almost impossible. And of course, you have here a half window. I'm not sure if you can see on the other side. It's basically a window, but it's a half window. So it has color shifting ink. Okay, so basically this is the future of banknotes, and with paper notes we will also see the same thing: increasing complexity, increasing use of 3D features, color shifting inks, and so on. Just want to mention an interesting thing as well. I discussed durability of security features. This note from Romania was introduced in 2005, and it's basically unchanged for the last 15 years. And this Vietnamese series is unchanged for the last 17 years. So we are, of course, expecting an update of both series. But again, 15 to 20 years is a very long time to keep the same security feature. Okay. Let's move on. Let's see what I have. Okay, I wanted to show how security features are first developed in internal testing, under controlled condition, in specialized labs at printer facilities, how they test them internally, and how then they make their way to the final product. So this is a substrate with a security feature, and maybe somebody will recognize this security feature and where it first appeared on an actual note. So if somebody has an idea, just go ahead. Oh. Okay, so this is the actual fully printed test note for this issue. And now this is the actual note. Okay, so this is Singapore, $10, and you can see this security feature and how this was transferred from an internal test to the actual banknote. And this is basically how this was presented to the monetary authority in Singapore, so they could assess the feature. They could choose from a variety of features, and of course the printer needs to give an assurance about the safety of this feature, about durability of this feature in actual circulation, and then the issuing authority will choose based on that recommendation. Again, let's look at another note. So this is the De La Rue Einstein note, and I want to show this security feature. If somebody knows what it is, this is a especially optically variable ink. It's called Spark, and the first time this feature appeared on an actual note was this note. Okay, so you can see Mauritius 500 and this test note. Sorry. Okay, I have just another one to show. So basically, polymer, Guardian polymer or modern polymer was being developed by the Reserve Bank of Australia in 1970s and 1980s, and optically variable devices were first very crude, like this one. So this is a polymer substrate, and this is how first tests on this polymer substrate, trying to achieve some variability in optics were conducted. And this is another sample with Queen Elizabeth, a little bit more advanced. And this was basically the final test, and probably some of you could guess which note then actually received this feature. So this was the first modern polymer banknote in the world, and they used this optically variable device in the clear window. So I think this is an interesting transition from test notes into the actual notes. And if you're lucky and go into one of the printers labs and see what they are developing, you can see they are developing all sorts of different features, some of which will see the actual circulation, and some of which will be scrapped for different reasons, mostly because there's a problem with durability of the feature, and the problem with the fidelity of the feature throughout the entire life of the note. So you can introduce a feature, a security feature on the note. However, if it does not stay basically intact through the entire life of the note, which could be a few months for really low denomination, harsh condition notes, to maybe 10 years or more for high denomination notes. If you cannot retain that feature, then it's not really effective, because as soon as you have variations in this feature during circulation, then people will see that there is something wrong with the feature, and they will start to doubt it. They will start to think that the note is counterfeit. So this is really not something that you can use. Okay. Let me go back to my. Okay. One thing I would like to discuss as well is different levels of security features. I mentioned this in one of my earlier presentations, and I was actually surprised that not many people knew about this. So basically, in the banknote printing industry, and among central banks, there are 3 levels of security features. So the first level is level 1 for general public. You will want the general public to know at least a few security features on the banknote. Usually it would be a watermark, it would be security threat. On Polymer notes, of course, it's the clear window. And then some members of the public would also recognize some additional security features like intaglio printing. Of course, as we said before, holograms and any 3D and color shifting security features are also effective at this level 1. Okay. Then we have level 2 security features. Level 2 would be for large cash handlers, for banks, commercial banks, exchange offices, and so on. So normally you would need a little bit more technical knowledge, and maybe in some cases you would need some devices to assist you in recognizing those and validating those security features. An example of that would be ultraviolet features. So you need an ultraviolet for that. Would be microprinting. You would need a loop to see the microprinting, infrared security features, and so on. And then we have level 3 security features, and this would only be available or only be recognizable by the printer and by the issuing authority. This means that special tagans, special chemical components are embedded in the banknote at various stages of printing, for example, as special additions of these chemical components into the printing ink or into the substrate or wherever they choose to do it. This signature, this chemical signature or magnetic signature would then be known to high-speed processing and sorting machines, which is basically available to central banks at their headquarters or at cash processing centers. Sometimes this would also be made available to very large cash users like very large commercial banks. So these are the 3 levels of security features, and any effective nodes will have to satisfy or have a certain range of security features from each of those 3 levels. Okay. Next thing. I talked a lot about security of Polymer nodes. So now let's talk a little bit about durability of Polymer nodes. They last about 3 to 5 times as long as paper nodes do. They do cost about twice as much compared to paper nodes. However, if you have twice the price but 3 to 5 times the lifespan, then you achieve significant cost savings. There are additional cost saving because there is much less transportation of nodes, much less sorting of nodes and sorting for fitness during circulation. So in circulation, as we all know, notes get pulled back to the central bank. They run them through the machines in order to take out counterfeits. And of course, these machines, based on specific criteria that are provided by central banks, will also sort out all the badly damaged notes which are no longer fit for circulation. And central banks can actually fine-tune these settings. So if they want to have a very high quality of banknotes in circulation, they will of course discard all the notes that don't fit their criteria. However, some central banks do not have such high standards, and then they will release sort of banknotes which are of lower quality, but they still deem them to be good enough for circulation. And in some occasionally it would happen that the bank would not have a ready supply of freshly printed notes, in which case the bank is forced to issue low quality notes back into the circulation. It happens. And also, of course, not every central bank will have this kind of technical capability. So in some central banks, this sorting is still done manually. Okay. So I would also like to address the acceptance of polymer notes by central banks. Of course, central banks are very conservative institutions. So when they see a new technology, be it a new security feature or something much more fundamental, like a change in banknote substrate from paper to polymer, they will, of course, want to stay on the safe side and not do something that could cause problems in actual circulation. And that hesitation meant that polymer notes have not appeared in circulation worldwide as fast as they could based on their merits and technical advantages alone. On the side of the printing industry, of the suppliers, of course, what happens when you go from paper to polymer is that you need to print 3 to 5 times less banknotes. And that, of course, means 3 to 5 times less business for suppliers, for printers, and for certain suppliers like producers of security threats. It could mean 100% loss of business because there are no traditional security threats in polymer banknotes. So basically, you had a situation where the entire printing industry was discouraging central banks from using polymer banknotes. When I say the entire printing industry, this of course does not apply to a few niche players that wanted to push polymer. However, nowadays, for example, even De La Rue, which was long opposing polymer banknotes, is now actively promoting them. Because they saw this as future, because they sold off their paper mill. So now they see this niche, and they are offering basically a mix of paper and polymer based on the requirements of central banks. Let me show you something else about durability of polymer substrate. So polymer substrate itself is incredibly durable. It's virtually indestructible. You can destroy it by starting a tear with a sharp object. So once a tear is started, you can peel it off easily, or I mean, you can split it in two easily, but if there's no tear, they can stay in circulation for a very long time. And some central banks actually did keep them in circulation for a very long time. So this is an early polymer note from Papua New Guinea. So you can see the underlying polymer substrate is still sort of firm. It's still working, but the inks are rubbing off. Okay, so this is a little bit better note compared to that one. So again, the substrate is basically intact, but the ink is wearing off. Of course, now at the beginning, central banks and the printers were not entirely aware that this could happen. And this is not so much a problem of polymer as it is a problem of the issuing authority not doing their job properly, right? Because you are supposed to pull back the notes, check them for quality, for fitness, and then reissue the good ones and take back the bad ones. However, if you leave them in circulation for 10 or 20 years, this is what you are going to get. And this was one of the early objections to the polymer substrate, when some central banks were saying, these banknotes are really bad. Look at them. They're no good. But of course, by the time you reach this stage with a polymer banknote, your paper note is gone. There's nothing left of it because it disintegrated already. Okay. For example, this is a paper note comparison from the same country. So basically, maybe this is at the same stage of note life, and at this stage, they're just polymer left because paper is long gone. So knowing that, central banks started to monitor the quality of banknotes in circulation more closely, and polymer printers and producers and promoters actually started requiring central banks to do that because they didn't want to see so-called ghost notes in circulation anymore. And this nowadays is not happening anymore, or it's not supposed to happen anymore anyway. Okay. So I have another example. This was from, maybe somebody recognizes the note. It's from Samoa. So also one of the very early polymer notes, both samples from Papua and from Samoa from early 1990s. So that's about 30 years ago. So currently, in terms of polymer, we have two major suppliers of substrate. One is Guardian, provided by CCL Secure, which is produced in 3 locations: Australia, United Kingdom, and Mexico. And another one is Safeguard, which is produced by De La Rue in the UK. So these are the two main substrates that now compete for market share, which is good because before De La Rue substrate appeared, there was another argument against polymer, which is there's only one supplier. So what if something happens with that supplier? How can you have a competitive tender if you want to use polymer? Because when you choose polymer, you already choose the supplier, and that's not good. That's not competitive. So there was all sorts of arguments going around, trying to prevent polymer notes from being used by other central banks. There are several printers which do not offer their own polymer banknotes, polymer substrate, but they do have it, and they are keeping it on the back burner. They are extensively testing internally on polymer printing. So if it comes to the point where they will need to use it, they will have it ready. One example of that is G&D, one of the largest commercial suppliers from Germany. This is one of their test notes. So on polymer, maybe this one is more obvious. This is an without intaglio. You can see the clear window, and you can actually see the word LD. And LD means low denomination test for euro currency. So there are internal tests being done by several different printers for euro currency. So basically, the European printers and the European central banks are also ready with the polymer technology if the decision is made. Of course, just recently, the new series on euro has been introduced, so we will not see polymer for at least 5 to 10 years. After that, still no decision. Another player on the market is Russian Goznak. So this is one of their test notes on polymer, and they use their own polymer substrate, which is basically a commercially available polymer substrate. So it's basically they're using a commercial clear film, which is not a high security product, but then they apply different printing layers and different security features to it to make it into a banknote. This is, of course, a lower a lower security specification compared to the other two substrates. Just to mention, because this is the IBNS presentation for historical overview, there were other substrates, first of which was Tyvek. This was produced on the DuPont polymer substrate, Tyvek, by the American Banknote Company and Bradbury and Wilkinson. There were 8 circulating notes produced from 1980 to 1988, where they discontinued the use of this substrate. I will show you 3 examples, not the 8 issued notes, but 3 test notes. So this one is a Tyvek test for Honduras. As far as we know, this is the only note known. There might be others, but in the last 40 years, nothing has surfaced. This is from Gambia, Africa, another Tyvek test, and this is a more known Cyprus test note on Tyvek polymer substrate. I think of this maybe three pieces are known so far. So this, as I said, this Tyvek technology was discontinued in 1988, about that time, and it left no influence on subsequent polymer development. So it was basically a dead end. That's why we can, in a way, say that modern polymer banknotes really started in 1988 with the issuance of the Australian $10 note. There was another attempt to produce polymer banknotes on Duranote substrate, and about a dozen different tests were conducted for different countries, about a dozen countries. So this is one for Canada on polymer substrate. This is for Venezuela. And now this is one for Bank of England. And this one is miscut on purpose, not to be confused with the real note. And interestingly, it is dated, as you can see, 1994. So 25 years ago. This test actually used the original intaglio printing plate, which suggests that this was not just a private initiative of a banknote printer, but that the Bank of England was actually involved in these tests as far as 25 years ago, because they needed to supply the authorization and the printing plates. Just because I showed this note on Duranote, let me show you one test note on Guardian for $50. So this is an unadopted design on Guardian substrate. So when Bank of Canada was considering a new banknote series, they were supplied by different printers, by different industry suppliers with proposals. And this one is the Guardian proposal. And you can actually see that this is already first a very advanced substrate and then a very advanced banknote design, because to produce something like this, you have to invest probably at least 100,000 euro just to produce a proposal for the central bank that they might adopt or might not adopt. And there were several different proposals in the game. So at the end, they, of course, as we know, opted for polymer, and this is the final product. I mentioned Bank of England before, so Pam West would know about this note. So this is also one of the early trials for Bank of England. And we can already see from here that they were considering using holograms. And of course, the hologram is then found on the final product here. Okay, let's move on. Okay, since we have 15 minutes left, at the end of the last presentation I had maybe 2 months ago, there were an awful lot of questions. So maybe we should give an opportunity to people to ask some questions, and then I can continue for a bit more.
I have already several questions for you. People have been writing on the chat in the meantime you were talking. So I'll go through them. And then if there are more questions, people can also ask directly. I still keep everyone muted to avoid background noises. So the first one, it's you were initially talking about intaglio on substrate. So how often there is an intaglio on both sides? Can you make some examples?
Well, I guess everyone can answer this question just by looking at the banknote. So nowadays, I would say that there is increasing use of only one side intaglio compared to two sides. So in the past, first world central banks that could afford to spend a bit more on banknotes were traditionally opting for two-side intaglio. But nowadays, I think there's an understanding that one-side intaglio is enough. For very low denominations, there's no intaglio at all usually. So it really depends on the central bank on the denomination.
All right. I'll go to the next one. The next question, when you were talking about the features on the test note and then it appears on the Singapore $10, did it appear in any other notes, or it will appear in different banknotes in future?
So far, off the top of my head, I think it appeared only on that Singapore note, which actually comes in 5 different varieties for $10 and one variety for $50. And no other country has used it. Whether it will appear in the future, nobody can answer that, because it comes down to a central bank saying, I want to use this feature. So if they say that, they can get the feature. Of course, it's not the cheapest feature, so maybe that's why we don't see it used more often.
Okay. Next question. With all the security features on Polymer banknotes, are the fraud detection companies keeping up? Like ATM, money counting machines, do they keep up with all these security features?
Okay. Of course, whenever new security features are introduced, then machines have to be adjusted. However, this will depend on whether security features are used for at the first level for the general public. So, for example, if you introduce a hologram like this, this is basically meant for a quick and reliable verification by the public. And this is not a feature that would need to be verified by machines, by ATMs or by sorting, counting machines. So you could introduce new security features, but you do not need to do anything about the machines, because this is not a security feature that is meant for machines. You have other security features that will perform this function.
All right. Let me see what else we have. Can you talk more about super notes, forgeries of Polymer notes in Mexico and Romania?
About forgeries. Okay. Yes.
Specifically, the question is about super notes. I don't know if there is any super notes polymer like they used or they still do for the $100 super notes.
Okay. Let me go back a little bit. So basically, you can counterfeit anything. Okay. I was assisting a few years ago my central bank in Slovenia with a specific inquiry, and I had access to counterfeit notes of euro notes to the criminal police, and the high-level counterfeits they had were absolutely amazing. What you had there, you had a hologram counterfeited to a very high degree, to a very high precision. You had intaglio printing. Basically, it was a very good simulation. Then you had UV features, watermark, everything was counterfeited. Of course, the same thing happens with US dollars. And these counterfeits are good enough to deceive basically every member of the general public. We're talking now level 1. Level 2, probably these features were good enough also to penetrate into the level 2 users. It would depend on what kind of verification technology and knowledge they are using. And of course, they would definitely fail at level 3. So what I'm saying is even the best possible security features can be counterfeited. It will depend on the money and the resources that are available to counterfeiters. So at this high level, you can only do this with an investment of several millions or maybe even several tens of millions of euros. With a high level operation, which can only be done by the organized crime or by state actors. So this will basically rule out all the normal counterfeiters. It's not so much a problem of counterfeiting something if you have the money and resources. It's more a problem of introducing this into the circulation. So if you do a small number of counterfeits, then it doesn't justify your cost and risk. If you do a high number of counterfeits, of course, the risk is exponentially increasing because you will have to introduce all of these banknotes into the circulation. And at every point of entry, you are creating data points for the criminal police to track you down. Okay. So you need to have low-level criminals to introduce this, and when you arrest one of those criminals and you question them, they might point to another guy. So this network starts to close, and they get nearer and nearer and nearer you. So you have this trade-off between how much I want to invest and how much risk I want to take. And by every step, I'm increasing my chances of getting caught. And this trade-off is basically keeping a lot of counterfeiting from actually happening. Of course, you always have low-level counterfeiters that will try to seize the opportunity and introduce a few banknotes. So in terms of Mexico and Romania, and also Vietnam, for example, you had a larger scale operation that invested a bit more resources, that produced a better quality counterfeit, and they actually successfully introduced quite a lot of this counterfeit. I think in each of those countries, the damage is counted in millions and maybe tens of millions of euros. But eventually, they got caught. So the more damage you cause, the more resources will be thrown into capturing you. So it has to stop at some point. So I'm not sure if I answered the question entirely. You can follow up.
I want to add my own question on this.
Okay.
So the security level 2 and 3 are usually kept secret from the public.
Not 2. 2 is actually 2 is usually available to the public because we would want, or central banks would want, people to be aware of as much security features as possible. Of course, people are not expert in this, so they usually know 0, 1, 2, a few people know 3 security features. So basically, there's not much point in explaining them level 2 security features if they can't even remember level 1 security features, but they're not kept secret.
But level 3 are kept secret, or?
Yes, completely, yes.
And for example, for us, dealers and collectors, we will be able to detect.
It's not possible. No, you won't be able to detect level 3. I think we lost the host. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay, you can. Okay, let me, I can see some questions here on chat, so let me go to Christopher Neal. Can CCL Cinema security feature be applied on De La Rue Safeguard Polymer? Could this be used for the Bank of England £50 notes? Okay, so this security feature is trademarked. It's proprietary feature for Guardian Substrate. Okay, so while it is theoretically possible for De La Rue and CCL Secure, which are competitors, to sort of make an agreement for this feature to be used to by De La Rue as well, and in that case there would be a technology transfer from CCL Secure to De La Rue. That's theoretically possible. However, I do not think this will happen for 2 reasons. One is because, of course, CCL Secure will want to market and benefit from their own security features, and also because De La Rue is already developing similar security features, so they will want to come up with something of their own, sort of to assert their market leadership, to assert their advanced technical position on the market, and not use somebody else's security feature. Now, let me ask something else. So let's say that the Bank of England wants to use these 3D security features on their £50 notes. So, and then you would have, because for lower denominations, like £20, you have 2 substrates and 2 producers for Bank of England. So in that case, if you want to have 2 as well on the £50 notes, both the CCL secure feature on Guardian substrate and the De La Rue feature on Safeguard substrate will have to be basically sort of indistinguishable from each other, because you do not want to see 2 banknotes produced by 2 different printers with differences in security features, because you will confuse people. So it's either the Bank of England will say, well, if you can make it the same, then we can award the contract to both of you. If you cannot make it the same, then we'll go just with one. So it will be in this sort of triangle of negotiation between Bank of England and the 2 suppliers, or maybe there will be a third one, we don't know, to sort of produce something that makes sense in circulation.
Okay. Guys, sorry, my computer decided to die. So I connect through the iPad quickly, but I lost the questions. So whoever asked, there were another about 5 questions or even 6. So if you remember your question, so you have access to the chat, can you please continue to read the questions to Stane? Cedrian, can you do that?
Okay. If you agree, I can just go through the questions because I can see them on chat now.
All right, then, please, please.
Okay, there is a question from Robert Frisch. Can you talk about Easter eggs, latent images in the clear windows visible by shining a laser through the window, like the Romanian eclipse node? This was also used in Vietnam and maybe some others, I don't remember. Yeah, anyhow, this I thought we would see more of this security feature being used, but it's not so straightforward to authenticate it. So what you need to do is you need to have a pointed light source. So basically you need a fairly dark place, or you need to do it at night, and then you need to have a single pointed light source opposed to a dispersed light, which will not give you the desired effect. And then you put the banknote to your eye, and then you look through it to the light source. And what you will see is a dispersion of light in a particular pattern. This pattern is basically embedded in the polymer substrate. It's sort of engraved in the polymer substrate, and when the light goes through, these patterns will disperse the light sort of like a rainbow does in a particular fashion, and it will produce an image. You can see this very clearly and very nicely with the laser. Green laser is better than the red one, by the way. But how many people carry a laser with them? Okay, so for verification purposes, it's not a very effective feature for people to use, and that's why it's not used more frequently. Okay, so let's go. Next question. Two more concerns: environmental production as well as for recycling. Okay, this is the first one. So there are publicly available studies covering the entire life cycle of banknotes, from initial production of source materials to the final disposal. And there were comparisons made for polymer versus paper. These were made by the Bank of England and by the Bank of Canada. As I said, you can publicly access them on their websites. And they show that polymer substrate is environmentally more friendly than paper substrate. Okay, and this owes to basically this result is due to several factors. One is you need less polymer banknotes. They're 3 to 5 times more durable, so you need 3 to 5 times fewer polymer banknotes, and this is of course a huge difference. Secondly, at the end of the life cycle, paper banknotes are either landfilled or burned or shredded and disposed as fertilizers in agriculture. Okay, I know in the United States they used to do this. I'm not sure if they do this anymore. And all of these are not very environmentally friendly ways of disposing of paper notes, with all the inks and security features that are added on top, and the varnishing layer and everything. Polymer banknotes can be recycled into down market plastic products for general use. Of course, you need to sort of remove certain gases, certain toxicity and everything, but this can be done, and is done in almost all of the countries that use polymer. Okay, so second part of the question was ethical constraints with some animal fat issues that were part of the substrate. Yeah, I'm aware that this was something that was seen in media. you are basically talking about trace amounts of animal fat. So, and I'm aware that some people were concerned or had certain issues about that. I guess I would say it is what it is. You know, it's a part of, it's a trace amount in the production. So if you are bothered with that and you get your way, and with the central bank, you could probably change it. But I think all of the central banks that were implicated in such a public uproar decided that this was a minor issue, and that required no change of course. Of course, when you go to paper banknote, if you are concerned about animal welfare, then the production of cotton is basically very demanding on the environment for two reasons. One is because cotton demands huge amounts of water to be used, and there are actually several areas of cotton production where water resources have been depleted because of cotton production. And secondly, cotton requires a huge amount of pesticides. Okay, so there's no ideal answer to anything, I guess. Okay, so an interesting question from Cedrian. There's a boundary between coins and notes based on cost and efficiency. There are also a boundary between polymer and paper for countries that have both polymer and paper. What do you think will be the trend? We'll see more fully polymer families or mix of paper and polymer. Okay, it's a complex question. So let's. There was a central bank that had one polymer banknote in circulation, and they were very happy with it, with the performance of it. Okay, but they discontinued it. So I asked the currency manager, why are you not using polymer note again? You were very happy with it. And sorry, just an interruption here. No dei pomahe popapet, wrong? Just my my daughter showed up here. Okay, a uški pomahala. No dei pa pustiati da povedo concept, no? Anyhow, so and I said, I know that you were very happy with polymer, and he said, yes, we were, but we discontinued it because we recognized that the mixture of paper and polymer in circulation did not work for us because the two substrates handle differently. There are small tweaks to the machine processing and to the way that people handle them. So we said we either want to go with polymer or paper. And we basically would like to go with polymer. However, we also realized that our high denomination notes had a very long life in circulation, more than 10 years, like 15 years, 20 years. We basically never see them coming back. So why would we invest in such a durable substrate at double the price and 3 to 5 the note life where we cannot use it? So if the 15 years triples to 45 years, it doesn't matter to us because we need to change it before due to security concerns. So that's one of the factors in their decision making. So going back to the boundary between coins and notes, of course, central banks will weigh the cost and benefits of, do we want to have coins or banknotes for lower denomination currency? Because coins do last longer than banknotes in circulation. However, when you get into a higher denomination coin, then you run a risk of counterfeiting because coins are quite easy to counterfeit. And this has happened in several countries already, where they had to remove the denomination and replace it with a banknote. an example of that is Malaysia with 1 ringgit coin becoming a 1 ringgit note, or the United Kingdom, where the £1 note had to be replaced with a new specification because there were so many counterfeits of it. So it's not just the durability, it's also the threat of counterfeiting, it's how high the coin banknote denomination is, and of course it's also what the public wants. So in the United States, we know that they wanted to introduce a $1 coin, but people don't like to use it. So you have all these sorts of different considerations: durability, security, cost, people, what they want, to determine what do you want to do with coins, with polymer, or with paper. It's a very complex story for the issuing authority. For obvious benefits of durability and security, I do think that we will see more of polymer banknotes in the future. And of course, we'll see more of those 3D and hologram featured on both paper and polymer banknotes. Okay. Ayman asked, are there any cases where a central bank used security features from different companies on the same note? Actually, yes. I think pretty much all of the notes, or most of the notes, use security features from different producers. For example, for inks, you would have SICPA from Switzerland as the leading producer of almost all security inks used nowadays in the world. Of course, some printing works, some countries have their own production of inks, and they might use their own inks entirely or in part. For example, they might say, okay, we want to use SICPA Spark feature because it's very effective, but admittedly, it's also very expensive. So we use our own inks for offset in intaglio, and then we add the Spark feature from another supplier. And then when you go to holograms, you would have some companies, for example, Kurz, which produce holograms, and there's a competition there. Or Suris, for example, is another company. And then you would take that from that supplier. And this is basically done by the printer, not by the central bank. The printer has to sort of produce a banknote that fits well together, design-wise, security-wise, circulation-wise, durability-wise. So there has to be some sort of a story for this note to work. So yeah, generally, there are many companies behind any banknote that you see today, with some exceptions. Are there? Okay, given that polymer notes show wear in a very different way compared to paper notes, is there a case to be made for grading polymers with different criteria, or is such a differing criteria already being used? Yeah, that's a good question. When the IBNS came up with our own grading criteria, I think that was last year, if I'm not mistaken. There were actually separate grading system or separate grading examples for polymer and paper substrate. So if you ask the IBNS, they do see the difference in the two substrate, also in terms of grading. If you ask third-party grading companies, it's a little bit difficult to speak on my behalf, but I can say that I submitted probably hundreds or thousands of both polymer and paper notes, And yes, there are different issues with polymer and with paper. So, for example, in polymer, you could see that certain nodes could have some surface staining already during production or during use, and these stains are usually penalized by third-party grading companies, and they give them 64 with no exceptional paper or polymer quality, and this is something that usually does not appear on polymer, on paper. However, paper notes, of course, they are more prone to accidental damage. So I find that I damage paper notes when handling them more easily, or when transporting them, because the edges get bumped more easily. Polymer is sort of more rigid, more durable, so you wouldn't have these issues. With paper, of course, you have issues with people washing and pressing them, and washing doesn't really work for polymer. So this is something that the grader, when grading polymer, does not need to pay attention to, whether the polymer nodes has been washed and pressed, because it simply doesn't work. Any folds in polymer any hard folds will be more obvious, because you cannot really soften them, you cannot really wash them, and flatten them. So yeah, there are obvious differences, I would think. So I think we've exceeded the time. I mean, I could go on. If you have more questions, I could go on, but we are already quarter past.
Yeah, I mean, what I can do, if you want later, maybe I can ask you and type the questions and share it if we left anything out. But yeah, I agree. Let's close, and some of us go to sleep, some of us go to work, and I don't know where the rest of the people go. So thank you, Stane. Thanks
Sure.
a lot for this informative lecture. And goodbye to everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.